What do you want your life to have stood for? How do you want to be remembered? Once they get that figured out, then you can walk backwards to the present day. Something I think is important for people to think about before they get out of prison in terms of making some sort of a reentry plan is to start with their goals. That might sound intuitive to many people. Many people think normally in the sense of goals, lists, schedules, they're organized, but not everybody thinks like that naturally. But I encourage people to think about what it is that they want to accomplish with their life as a whole. And so the first thing I do is talk about goals, but break them down into several different segments to make things more manageable. The ultimate purpose is to think about long-term life goals. You could also think about this in terms of the legacy that you want to leave behind. What do you want your life to have stood for? How do you want to be remembered? These are some of the things that I encourage them to think about. Once they get that figured out, then you can walk backwards to the present day. I also encourage them to think big, think outside the box. Most people, I think, when they are thinking about their reentry plan, it's either generic, like they just want to be successful, not come back to prison, or it's something like, I want to make a lot of money. Making a lot of money is fine, but the desire to make a lot of money is often what led some people to come to prison in the first place. Another thing I often hear is that people want to do well for their kids, or they want to start some sort of a nonprofit or charity. If you've never dealt with people in prison, if you've never been involved in prison or reentry, then you may not know that a lot of them express interest in giving back to the community, starting nonprofits and charities. Probably the number one thing that I hear from them is that they in some way want to help the youth, to try and prevent youth from going down the same path that they did. So the first thing is to think about lifelong goals, your legacy. What do you want to stand for? Now, this could include things like starting a nonprofit or a charity or giving back to the youth. It could be owning a large amount of property, land, or just something smaller like a home. It could include something like publishing a book, making an album, producing a movie. It could be something like, earning a black belt in some martial art, becoming a bodybuilder. I really ask them to think outside of the box, think big, think personal, what they want their life to have stood for. Family reconciliation, making a lot of money, starting their own business, becoming an entrepreneur. These are some things that I want them to just reflect on and take time doing that. Once they get that down, then you can walk backwards and begin to make these things more tangible and realistic. So the next stage would be 5-year goals. What does a person need to accomplish from the time they're released within a 5-year period in order to obtain some of those lifelong, longer-term goals? This is something I did almost 20 years ago when I was serving time in prison. I just got out some paper and I was writing down the things that I wanted to accomplish with my life. Things at that time were like starting a nonprofit or a charity. And one of the things I came up with was that I wanted to dedicate my life to educating the impoverished and the imprisoned. Because when I was making those plans, at that time, the internet wasn't as readily available with all of the free quality educational sources you can get for free now. And that was my idea. I wanted to help people get a good education who were poor or imprisoned and didn't have the appropriate access to these resources. So 20 years later, here I am attempting to do that, still on this path that I created 20 years ago. So what do they need to do in order to accomplish these lifelong goals within the first 5 years of release? If they're going to do something like publish a book, make a musical album, do video production, well, then they need to do things like establish a network of friends within the publishing industry, the music industry, the movie industry. If they plan to own a ranch or land or a home, then they need to do things like begin a savings account. Also understand what goes on in the home buying process. If they plan to own a successful business, then within the next 5 years, they need to not only understand the business world by maybe taking classes, but also to start a DBA or start an LLC, get their feet wet trying to understand what it's like to be a business owner. If they're going to start a nonprofit, it's the same deal. I think a lot of people don't understand that the nonprofit sector is its own sort of industry with a lot of rules and things that are different, and it takes a while to understand what's going on in that realm. So one of the things I did was I worked at a resale shop, a nonprofit ministry out in Katy, Texas when I first got out of prison, And that was very helpful to me in understanding what it takes to run a nonprofit business. So whatever it is that they want their life to stand for, whether it's family reconciliation, owning a business, starting a charity, writing a book, within the first 5 years, they need to start establishing that network that will lead them towards those goals. Now back it up to the first year. What do they need to do to accomplish those 5-year goals within the first 12 months of release? If they're going to start a business, well, at a minimum, they could just start researching some things online or maybe looking into some potential classes. Another lifelong goal that some people might have is to pursue higher education, to pursue it at a high level, like a graduate degree, a master's or a doctorate degree. So that's what I've done. Within that first 12 months, it's reasonable that they could understand the enrollment process in a college setting and do whatever they need to do to transfer credits they may already have or apply and gain admission. That's a reasonable goal within the first 12 months of release. They're going to do things like publish books, own land, start businesses. There are things they can do within that first 12 months. Some of those might include getting more reliable transportation. For example, they may not have reliable transportation immediately upon release. They might be relying on family or friends to drive them around. Or in my case, I had to walk to work. Eventually I got a bike, and then a few months later I was able to get a car. So getting reliable transportation within that first 12 months is something they might want to think about. So also with getting reliable housing, or maybe getting a gym membership, or finding out what volunteer activities are in their area by going online and finding out what volunteer services are available that they can actually participate in. So you've got your lifelong, sort of your legacy. What do you want your life to stand for? Then to make it more tangible, back it up to 5 years. What does a person need to do within 5 years of release? Then back it up even more. What does a person need to do within that 12-month period in order to achieve those 5-year goals? And then you get down to the immediate goals. The immediate goals are a lot more variable. Everyone has pretty much a unique situation. Some people might have a place to live, but not transportation. Some people might have transportation, but not a reliable place to live. Some people might need medication, may not have identification, may not have a job. There are just so many different factors. Some might be required to pay child support or fees. There's so many different situations. The immediate goals are those things that they need to think about focusing on immediately upon release, but they need to start doing that while they are still in prison. They need to go ahead and make those plans. Are they going to have documentation when they get out, like their ID, Social Security, and birth certificate? If not, what do they need to do to get it? Are they going to have a reliable place to go for medical care if they need it? Are they going to have transportation? If not, is there a bus system? How do you get a voucher? Are they going to have a reliable place to stay? If not, where are the shelters at? Where are the halfway houses at? So the immediate goals are things they need to focus on immediately upon release, but they can get that started while they're still in prison by writing different organizations who are trying to help. Now, in the worst case scenario, somebody is going to get out and they have nowhere to go. They don't have anywhere to go. They don't have transportation. They don't have any friends and family who are trying to reconnect with them or help them out in some way. In that scenario, how I would explain to a person what to do is also going to be very different depending on where they go. Ideally, someone in that situation would go to an urban area where there are a lot more resources to help someone in their situation, as opposed to going to a rural area like here in Texas, like going out to East Texas or something where there's really just nothing out there to support you. So I'll make a separate section specifically focused on those who don't have any help or support. But that's one of the first things that I would talk to somebody about when they're trying to make their reentry plan. Think long-term, life goals, legacy, what do they want their life to stand for? Then break it down to 5-year goals, 1-year goals, and then some of the more immediate goals. And what can you do while still in prison to begin working towards all of these goals? By thinking in a goal-oriented way, you're much more likely to be successful, not just in terms of re-entering to society, but just more successful in life. But thinking in a goal-oriented way is not always natural to some people. It is for those who are high in conscientiousness, but it's not always natural to everyone else. But it is something that can be developed, especially if you show people its value and why it's important.